I guess I will call this meeting to order, and I am hoping that Sandy and or Jim will join us. Welcome, everybody, to our regularly scheduled Board of Finance meeting. Just from an agenda perspective, I was going to share my agenda as soon as I find it. There we go. The first item on the agenda is public participation. Is there anyone who is in the meeting that would like to contribute something that is not somewhere else on the agenda, or make any comments? Hearing none, let's move on. We have two sets of minutes to approve. They are, and I have the packet. So the May 20th minutes and the May 27th.
So what's the big secret about it?
Hi, Sandy, how are you?
Good, thanks.
Okay, I have the May 20th minutes. Does anybody have any comments, corrections?
Would appreciate just a minute. Would the chair entertain a motion, or will she be asking for unanimous consent?
I was going to ask for unanimous consent, hearing no comments or changes. Hearing no comments or changes, I request, excuse me, unanimous consent for the May 20th meeting minutes. Okay, May 27th meeting minutes. One thing I would like to change, Linda, instead of approximately $64,000, can you make that the exact number, the $64,499?
Okay.
Thank you.
Madam Chairperson, I just have one comment, and my recollection is that Sandy Pirog was happy to report a savings of approximately $90,000, but it was actually $130,000.
That is correct.
It's actually $130,000.
130 is the correct number.
Thank you.
Okay.
And 130, I guess maybe this is not the appropriate price, but 130 was reflected in the in getting from 40.14 down to 40.16. Is that correct? Thank you.
As was the $64,499 on the Board of Education side.
Yeah. Let me read this one thing which is associated with my name. Yes, that's okay.
Any other comments from anybody from the board? Then I ask for unanimous consent to approve the minutes for May 20, is that 7th, 27th,
One
Amended.
moment. There's
as amended.
there's one thing that that I think is slightly inaccurate. Just 1 second. Yes, okay, I'm on board. Thank you.
Okay. Then the next item on our agenda is tax collector's report. This is as of the end of May. You can see where we are in terms of our tax collection. We are over 100% on current year levy for vehicle and pretty close on supplemental motor vehicle. And in line with where we were last year at this time.
Is there anything about this report that requires our attention?
Nope.
I suggest we move on.
Revenues. From where we are here, there is, this is again as of the end of May. And Sandy, is there anything on this of note that we should be worried about?
Not at this time, with the exception of potentially tuition, which I can't comment on.
Superintendent Hecht, is there any comment there in terms of the tuition? I'm assuming you're referring to this number correct right here, the $3,839.72.
So, I mean, as it stands right now, we only have 2 students coming to 9th grade, but I got word yesterday that potentially we may have more. So, you know, that's a hard one to say until the October 1st deadline.
Okay, these are actually for this current fiscal year.
Oh, this current fiscal year? Oh, I don't have a comment on that now. Sorry.
Okay. But that will be interesting to note as we're going into next fiscal year. Okay. On our town expenditures, if we are continuing the habit of highlighting things in yellow that we need to worry about, there is nothing highlighted in yellow. And when I reviewed this, there was nothing that stuck out as being a complete outlier. Sandy, is there anything that you want to particularly highlight?
Only that the fringe benefits and highway expenditures and police protection will be expended before the end of the fiscal year.
Okay.
What does that mean, Sandy?
It means that we haven't received the police protection bill yet from the state for our current fiscal year. In case you haven't noticed, there's a big paving project going on Hebron Road that we'll be paying for shortly. And there's a fringe benefit bill for the last month and a half that has not yet been paid.
But you're expecting them to be paid,
Correct.
or within the accrual time period.
That is correct.
Thank you.
Okay. So the fringe benefits, the highways, and police, $400,000 there. So those 3 large numbers you expect to be expended by the end of the year. Great.
Correct. And Indian Notch opened this Wednesday, so we will also see parks and town buildings decreased significantly.
Okay.
So the message here is not to get all excited for additional underspend.
I anticipate there might be some additional underspend, simply because some items that were on the list to be purchased and or paid for in June came in slightly less than expected, but I don't think it's going to be a number that's 5 digits.
Knocks our socks off. Yeah, thank you.
Okay. Transfers. These were made at your last Board of Selectmen meeting. And I think we briefly talked about a few of these as it related to the fire truck repair, correct?
Correct.
Okay. Any questions on these transfers? Fiscal year 2020. So I actually want to move to the next one to show current year. Current year, Superintendent Hecht, we've expended 80%. Would you like to, is there anything of note here?
Just that in terms of the transfers, we won't be able to talk about that tonight because the board did not take action on that at their meeting. They'll be discussing that further at their June 24th meeting. There was a question about a text, so we had to get some clarity, and Sarah wasn't at the meeting to provide that clarity, unfortunately. So we are looking right now at $298,732 in terms of returning after the commitments that we've made towards next year's budget. I do anticipate that that's probably on a couple, 3 more pages down, Emily, if you wanted to scroll down so everybody could see that.
1, 2. There? Yes.
Yep, right there. So I do anticipate it's likely that's going to be larger. It's going to be dependent upon certain things that we have ordered that we're still waiting for. You know, COVID presents itself with a bunch of challenges, and getting things in any kind of timely fashion is certainly so. But, you know, I think that is a good thing for the following year's budget, which I have spoken about previously.
May I ask a question?
Mm-hmm.
Yes, go ahead, Dick.
So when you've ordered stuff and you expected it in and it doesn't come in by the end of June, do you also have the ability to accrue that for 3 months?
Say that again?
So when you order stuff that you would expect it to come in and it takes longer than expected to come in, doesn't make it by the end of June, do you have the ability to accrue that expense for 3 months into the next year?
No.
You don't?
Go ahead, Sandy.
I was going to say, if a valid purchase order has been accepted, and we have a commitment from the vendor to deliver at a time certain in the future, like
July 10th.
Yeah, like July 10th. That's not a problem. We can encumber those funds based on the purchase order, and as long as the purchase order is closed out in a reasonable period of time, and that's undefined. However, we had to have a discussion with the auditor on some capital purchases where it's very obvious we ordered them and we aren't going to get delivery in a short period of time. And the auditor has advised us that in those circumstances, we need a signed contract or a signed purchase and sale agreement for the delivery of those items. And if both of those documents, the purchase order and the signed purchase or sale agreement or a purchase contract are in hand, we'll have up to a year to close that purchase out. So that's where we are there.
That makes a lot of sense. Is that what Casal is operating under, Kristen?
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes, one of the challenges with sort of post-COVID, nothing is getting delivered in a timely fashion. So,
Coupled with the part that Sandy talked about, right? The two components of,
Yeah.
you know, she's talking about large items versus, you know, 30 textbooks or whatever. So, you know, time's going to tell on those pieces. So we call vendors daily. So that's what I got.
Could I ask a second question, which is?
yes, go ahead, Dick.
Thank you. A lot has been made in the past about the effect of the Texas Board of Education and its ability to skew the textbook content, if you will. Are you seeing that in the textbooks that you are seeking to buy? Do you understand what I'm saying?
I do. No, we're not seeing that.
You're not seeing that. This isn't. They aren't affecting things nationwide, but only in the South, apparently.
No, actually, that's not true. Honestly, it depends on the vendor. It depends on the text. And it's not only textbooks, right? It's also technology. We tried to just get some whiteboards for teachers to write. I mean, it's just a lot of things.
For instance, Texas has required all of their schools to not teach evolution, I think.
I see what you're saying. Oh, yeah, no. We don't get directives like that, but we have had the state add mandatory courses that with a mandatory curriculum that we're going to have to start teaching. So we certainly, and there are things in state statute that are required to teach.
That's
U.S. history being one of them.
And race history and with an emphasis on scientific fact rather than something that's faith-based.
Well, I can't quote the statute for you. So it's a list. We have Black and Latino culture that is now going to be mandated to be taught in high school as an elective, which is a great thing. So there's a whole list in state statute.
Thank you. I think I've spent enough time on this, a little bit off topic, but I appreciate the information.
Okay. Any other question about this fiscal year's budget from the Board of Education? Welcome, Bob Monroe. I see you popped up into my screen there.
I did. Thank you for the welcome. What a saga it was getting here. Amazing.
I know for comparison purposes, the Board of Education always provides us with last year's report. Is there anything from here that you want to make a comparison to last year, Superintendent Hecht? Okay. If anybody's curious, it's obviously in your packet as to where we stand as of last fiscal year, so 2020.
EOEs. Hang on one second. Oh, that's last year. Okay.
Yeah, that's last year. Okay. Then I will move on to transfers, which you said you were not able to talk to because you actually did not get to this in your Board of Ed meeting, even though it was provided in the packet. So we will.
Did not take action on this.
You did not take action on it. So because of the textbooks component.
There was we had to clarify some things.
Okay. And we are not there yet. So
it's a very short list.
Okay. Then the next item on our agenda is to, any other updates from town officials? Otherwise, I'm going to move on to the budget discussion. Just out of curiosity, do you see the agenda at the moment, or do you see the Board of Ed up? Just the agenda? Okay.
Board of Ed.
Board of Ed.
Okay. I'm very used to Google Meets, and which works a little different than Zoom. So then let us continue on to our discussion of the budget for the upcoming referendum. As one of the things, let me find a few things to share here. I apologize. I'm just going to go back here for a second so I can. Okay, one of the things that I wanted to do is just do a quick summary of where we started and where we are at the moment. This is something that I sent out to the board, so you should have this. If you don't have it electronically, it is up on the screen. What I tried to do is, the first column is the adopted budget for last fiscal year 2021. In our presentations to the Board of Finance, you can see at the bottom here the various asks that were made as part of their budgets. Just as a point of reference, differences between fiscal year 2021, what was adopted, and what was the ask for this year, these small numbers are sort of just a comparison. Going into the public hearing, we made two cuts, two reductions, one to the town for $30,000 and one to the Board of Education for $100,000, which would have required a mill rate of 41.45 to come up with the property tax in order to support that. After the public hearing, further discussions, some additional revenues that we were able to account for, and some reductions as well. We had some additional givebacks by both the town and the Board of Ed. And going into referendum, which is this next column, is the ones that are highlighted in yellow are just the things that changed from the previous column. You can see we had additional revenues we realized. We could reduce our property tax and some other revenues that went down. In addition, we had the medical insurance savings, the net medical insurance savings, which we incorporated here, $130,000 from the town side, and the $64,499 on the education side, which brought us to a budget that needed a 40.16 mill rate to support that. Just as a point of note, if you were to compare what we sent to referendum that was voted down, the overall expenditures is only $164,950 more than what was adopted last year.
Wow.
Adopted but not actually spent.
Correct.
Would you say that again, Emily, please?
So the numbers sent to referendum, the expenditures numbers, the $23,073,494 that referendum on Tuesday is only $164,950 higher than the expenditures that were adopted as part of last year's fiscal year budget. I'm just pointing, points of reference. On Tuesday night, I indicated that there were some additional revenues that we could recognize, that if expenditures were the same, it would reduce our property tax burden and give us a mill rate of 39.99. And so it affected the three numbers in green. It was asked of me if I could share again what the details of those numbers were. So in the other document that I sent to you, the items, just so you orient yourself, adopted budget for 2021, the revised budget for 2021, those are revenues that we accepted for this fiscal year. And the third column is what we went to referendum with. The last two columns are sort of after referendum. If we, the revenues that we can recognize are highlighted in yellow.
And those are itemized as follows.
So if you look on page 2, you can see property tax current year levy, that's the 11,611. The motor vehicle levy, 1,460. Prior
Can you give this in deltas?
So yes, that's what these little small numbers, the $11,611 difference between on motor vehicle, the $1,460 difference. For prior year taxes, $7,000. Interest and fees, $3,000. Those are revenues that we can recognize for fiscal year 21. And then the revenue that we could recognize for going into fiscal year 22 is the increase of the ECS, the increase, and it's an increase by $54,948.
So a total of $78,000.
Mm-hmm. So that is sort of a recap. You have this now in your inbox if you didn't see it beforehand, and a direct comparison to what we went to referendum with right now. Okay. Any questions on that?
Just to be clear here, looking at the screen up that you have right now, BOE reductions. So this was part of where I fell off the bus the other night, and just want to make sure I've got all 4 tires on the ground here, which I've been on for many, many hours. The BOE reductions, this represents now a total of 164,000. And this is the 100,000 was what we had reduced initially. The 64,000 basically comes from the savings from the medical.
It's the net medical savings. There were 2 items that Kristen had talked about on Tuesday, and I had talked about at our previous meeting, special ed and some COVID-related expenses having to do with air conditioning units. So the net is $64,499.
Okay. And one other screen, maybe. So you had some up there a moment ago, and that was showing the difference between last year's budget and this year's was what? The difference.
Oh, last year's budget, this one?
Yeah, I think so. I think that the difference was only 164,000 now.
Yes.
Between the 2 budgets.
Between the 2, all of the budgets, total expenditures as it stands right now is $164,950 more than the adopted budget for 2021. I just want to make sure that everybody's sort of level set as to this is where we are.
Can I ask some questions?
Yes, you may, Dick.
Thank you. So the initial request from the Board of Education was for $275,000 more for insurance related expense increments, of which how much of that was for health insurance?
The health insurance increase initial request was for $217,695.
218. Okay. And so the rest of it was for other other types of benefits, including other insurances.
Get life insurance, social security, payroll, Medicare payroll taxes, pension,
Yep, okay,
banking fees.
okay. So, and then we had the COVID-related air conditioning expense. That's an expense for this year, is it?
We had that expense this year and for back in the fall and again for the last month of school. And we will have that expense again for the first month of school and likely the last month of school next year.
And so you bought air conditionings to air conditioners?
We looked into purchasing it because I didn't know if that was going to be cheaper at that point, right? So we looked at that. It was exponentially more expensive, especially since we couldn't put anything on the roof because we need to have a new roof. And that is a project that is going to be coming forward within the next year or so.
Yep,
So we have rental units.
Okay.
rentals. And the special ed was 75K, was it?
76,673, if I'm not mistaken.
76, so it's 77.
Mhm. So the net available savings is the $64,499 that we incorporated into the EOE reductions for the referendum.
Okay. When you so out of the benefits that you originally asked for, your initial ask was 275. You said 218 was for the health insurance.
So can I just make a correction, Dick, if I could, please?
Sure.
I'm not sure what number I heard you say. I thought I heard you say 275, but our
Yes.
benefits number, our overall benefits number was 225,590. And out of that, the health insurance number is 217,695.
Okay, so 217 is 218.
So
Okay.
225 and 218, if you want to round up numbers.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for that. It's important, I think, to ground ourselves in numbers we can all agree on. And so that 218 additional went down to what? Again? So you still required a little bit of new money, but it wasn't anywhere near as much.
So I don't have that yet because the board hasn't taken action on that yet, Dick. So I can only give you the numbers that I've been able to present to you. The board has to take action on that in their budget once a budget is passed.
Okay, but you've told us that we've got net savings. In order for net savings, you had to assume that the health insurance was at a certain number. So all I'm asking is how much above fiscal year 21 is that number?
I don't have that. The board hasn't taken action on that yet. I'm not trying to be difficult. I can't give you that because my board doesn't have that yet.
But Superintendent, you've given us a number for the overall savings. And to give us that number, you have to know, you have to have an estimate of what the health insurance costs are going to be. And it's going to be much less than 218. But how much is it? What is that number?
I don't have that exact number, Dick.
Well, then how is it possible for you to give us a net?
Because Casal provided me that information and I don't have the final number yet. We still have positions to hire and I don't have that number this evening because I have.
So
the estimates.
Casal has given you a net number, but has not given you the number that backs out what we could probably figure it out right here, could we not?
I would ask if Casal has done the analysis based on what came in on open enrollment from employees that are there and made an estimate based on unhired people, what she thought it would be, and gave us and figured out with if you take out the special ed and the COVID air conditioning, that the net she expects to be $64,499.
Yes.
And, from our perspective, that's a number that we took and incorporated and said, okay, we expect them to see that savings. So we are going to reduce their budget by that because they feel comfortable that that is going to be the savings that they should see. The actual savings might be different once you have hired all those people and they actually take the benefits that they are going to take.
So all I'm trying to get at.
The Board of Education's issue to then figure out what the delta is and how to deal with that within their budget. From our perspective, we had the full ask of $15,201,413, and we made one cut and we realized a second set of savings. So from a bottom line, we've reduced their budget by $164,499.
Their budget request for.
Their budget request, yes.
So can I get a word in edgewise here?
Can I finish my thought? So once the budget has passed,
I had the
Board
floor.
of Education
Point of
will
order.
then take that and determine which line items it will come out and what exactly it is there. So from Superintendent Heck's perspective of what is that line item number going to go down to, because the Board of Ed has not taken action on that because we don't have the referendum, that is not something she can answer at this point.
So
We are dealing with
if I could make a comment, because I don't think I yielded the floor.
yes,
so
you
there's-
may make a comment.
So there's 133,000 in the COVID air conditioning and the special ed, right?
Correct.
So if you add that to the 64, you get 197. So out of the 218, you save 197 of it. Correct? And so that would be the incremental add would be $21,000. And all I'm asking is, are we in agreement with that number? Because it's important to be in agreement with the numbers here before we start the debate.
I'm going to, in terms of the numbers that I received from Casal, that gives us that net. And if you were to back it up like you just did, then those are numbers that I am comfortable with. It was the net of $64,499, the special ed, not special edition, sorry. And the air conditioning is $131.
No.
And add those together, get 197. So
The air conditioning was 58, right?
55.
And the special ed was 77?
Yes.
You said 55 and 77,
So it's about 132.
132. So 196. So 196 less than 218. So my question is that I wanted to lead up to is, what was the basis of Casal's estimate? Did she assume that all 8 positions or 7 positions or however many positions would be the full family rate of $23,000?
So Casal's number was based on all of the open enrollment data, as well as, to your point, the open positions, which we budgeted for at family, which we always budget for at family.
Okay, so in your experience, do all the new hires come in at family?
We have had years where all the new hires came out of families. We have had other years where we've had some new hires take no insurance. We've had other years where some take family, some take 2-person, some take single, some take none. We've had the experience of all of the above, which is why we budget for family, so as not to be cut short.
Thank you.
Okay. Everybody on the same page with me? Okay. The referendum, did I hear a comment?
I just cleared my throat. It might have been me.
Okay. The referendum failed. So based on that and based on the charter, we have to make reductions to the total expenditures. That is our charge. So we have to start with, we can start with this last column here as to, from a revenues perspective, but we have to make some additional cuts. We started our conversation on Tuesday as to how we each felt about those cuts. I have some scenarios that a couple of people emailed me, and so I did prepare a few scenarios, but I wanted to, Bob, I saw your hand wave at me. So Bob Monroe, if you would like to make a comment before I move on.
Yeah, another question. Okay, the air conditioning, back on the other thing, I was unaware. I was thinking that was a purchase, okay, of air conditioning. That's what I walked away with from the last meeting. And I was going to suggest that I just think that was, an inappropriate place to put that, as I was mentioning in our last discussion. To have that type of expense in an operating budget. But Kristen, you mentioned that we did this in the last year as well, the year that we're coming to an end.
Correct.
Correct.
And I'm assuming the cost was probably similar.
Just about basically the same.
Which is like, what, 55,000 plus or something, right?
Mm-hmm.
So how was that budgeted last year? I mean, how did you handle it, or how did you handle it this year within this budget?
We had to cover it. We had to cover it, and there were at some point there have been some transfer of monies into John Butcher-Movich facility budget, and we had to put it into facilities because, again, I will remind everyone that we could not use fans because of COVID, right? And we're in the same boat at the start of school because all of our younger kids will not be vaccinated.
Right. Okay. So my point being is that it was an expense that you needed to meet in the fiscal year that we are now getting to the end of, and you funded it through your budget appropriation.
Correct, because if you recall, we have a number of positions that we have not been able to fill. So we have.
I do recall because, looking at the numbers, the Board of Education surplus funds, I mean, you guys have come up big time to support this budget to the tune of $475,000.
Correct.
We're still looking at an additional $300,000 in unspent funds for $770,000. And my suspicion is that it's likely to get bigger yet by the time the school year ends.
Yeah, and I said that at the beginning, I think maybe before you were on the call, Bob.
Oh, I'm sorry? I
had said that exact statement before. I may have been before you got on the call.
Oh, that there may be some additional funds yet.
Correct.
Unspent, right. So I kind of go back, for me, you guys all know, I mean, I have a simple mind and I look at this stuff in a very simplistic manner. When I believe I have the total BOE ask for new money for this coming budget was a combination mainly of the medical and I believe like 127,000 or something like that to support the rest of the education effort. So I think the request was for a total of $388,000.
Correct.
Oh, okay. And right now, that has been reduced by 164, almost say 165,000. So that's still a difference between the ask and the reductions at this point of $220,000. given all the good news that we've gotten over, last few days, and thank goodness for all the town's efforts and everybody's peeking under rocks and everything else, and the potential of yet substantial more surplus unspent monies in the Board of Education budget, which is going to get it up there, over $800,000, maybe 900, who knows. It's really hard for me to justify, in my mind, granting increases to the Board of Ed, given those scenarios. Now, I know it's a complex picture, and I know that you do a masterful job, and Kristen, in guiding all of us through this. But I think that given my experience with referendums that have gone bad, didn't get approved, I'm really leery of getting into some sort of a snowball downhill effect. So I really am of the school that we should come in with hopefully just about our bottom line here that we think we can live with and get by in order to show a substantial difference to the taxpayers that this has been dealt with as seriously as possible. And I say this in light of the fact also that in a quick discussion with Sandy, the federal monies that I've been wondering about and whether or not we're going to get any are, I think, becoming clearer. And in the next fiscal year now, I think we're looking at the potential of upwards of $700,000 coming in, and the same thing the following year. So those funds, because they were unknown as to how much, and as everybody's pointed out, unknown still as to the restrictions that may be in there. But it seems to me that, and as I related some of Ross Lally's comments that he picked up from the voters, and then Sandy's addition to that, which was the other part, was saying, hey, with all these federal dollars, how can we be looking at tax increases? So I think we need to do more. So I'm going to make the following motion.
Bob, before you make a motion, not everybody has sort of commented on sort of where we are right now. So can you hold the motion?
Okay.
Ross hasn't had a chance to speak. And I Kristen also had her hand up. Nope. Okay. Ross.
Yeah, I just wanted to, again, I understand, having been here for all this hard work that we've done, I just wanted to just share, the feedback that I got. I was moderator for voting. I didn't get out of there till late because we had to do a bunch of cleanup after the polls. I was there pretty much from 6 in the morning. Was there like 6 in the morning until when the polls closed at night. And I will share the feedback that I got, and please don't shoot the messenger. I'm just saying what I.
Kristen's not going to do that.
Yeah, go ahead and shoot the messenger. It's not going to make any difference. But let me just go and share, what I heard, because we had 728 votes come in. And of these, 267 were yes. And those folks, in general, appreciated the work that we did and what the budget, went into the budget making process. And then there were 461 who said no. And they were much more vociferous. And specifically, what I heard from them was, we're getting all this federal tax money. You can look at the list. They're out there. They're published. What's going to each town. How come you're raising my mill rate when I see how much Bolton is supposed to get? And again, people don't understand the restrictions, the timing, and so forth. But that was a comment that I heard. The other one that I heard was they know that money is important to education, but at a certain point, when is, enough too much, and when are we not getting any more value for what we're spending? Then the other comments that I heard were more along the lines like, my revenue was reduced because of COVID, and you're asking for more out of my pocket. I'm a senior on a fixed income. I can't afford this to keep going up. I lost my job. I don't have the money to give. The other towns around are holding the mill rate increases. So this is what I heard. So I just wanted to report it directly to this group, because it kind of feeds into what, Bob was saying, that I don't think that people will be happy with a token, some token amount. And I just think that we could just get into this cycle of just letting this keep going. And you put out a small amount. And what I've understood from talking to folks is more people typically come out for the second time around. So we got 728 this time. We're expecting more to come out the second time. So whatever we do, you got to account for whether these perceptions of these people who said no, because they're going to come back again. And regardless of what we say or how good a job we think we did with educating, either these people, don't listen, they just, or they just see, they have a different view of, things which they're entitled to. So I just want to, pass that on to set the stage for what I heard, from folks, over the course of that whole day that I was there. So again, it kind of feeds in with what, Bob was saying. So that was it. Thank you.
Thank you, Ross. Kristen, now I see your hand up.
No, and I think it's important to get the feedback directly from the people. What I do think is really unfortunate when you look at this year compared to when we were going through the budget last year and when we displayed it out to the public. And as regularly, we have, obviously public participation. What I find striking are a couple of things. First off, last year, when we presented our budget to the public, we had participation. And that participation made a difference. I mean, I would say that it certainly impacted, my view and my perspective and my thought about the original budget we had presented, and we took action on it. This last year, other than other board members, we didn't have any. We just had the first round referendum, and look, tonight, we don't have any public participation. So I do find it curious, and I certainly don't discount feedback as people are leaving the polls, but it does kind of make me scratch my head a little bit. And I think it's more of just a question. I'm intrigued by it. But also you said something very interesting, and it's an important point, is the fact that more people do come out for that second round, which also leads me to believe that the town is conditioned to knee-jerk reaction, first round of budget, just voting no. And it's a question. It's a question that I am just throwing out, and I think it's something that we should consider. What really is, the public trying to tell us? I want to know the substance as opposed to if it is just a knee-jerk reaction. I don't want to give that just validity, because I do think everybody spent a lot of time and effort and thought across all three boards to present something that was reasonable. So that's all I have to say. I do think there are just a couple of things there, though, that we do need to consider as we go through this process tonight.
So, Kristen, just one comment in terms of historical, if, it fails on the first one, and I don't have that data here, but I do recall that if we've had an increase, if we are proposing an increase to the mill rate, typically it fails on that first referendum. And then it will pass either the second or third. On the years where we've had no increase or a decrease, it tends to pass on the first try. So I think historically, what we're seeing right now is right in line with, what we've seen in the past. So.
And don't get me wrong, I understand. I mean, this year was extremely unique. I'm optimistic about some things that I think we're all seeing, but we don't have the concrete numbers to really work with. I do feel very optimistic about next year's budget, but we're not at next year's budget. We're at this year's budget, and we can only work with what we have. And I want us to be very thoughtful when we start talking about big cuts and not making big cuts too quickly.
Okay. Let me see who else. I'm scrolling through my little windows here. Dick Tuttle, you have your hand up? Dick?
Just a quick comment as soon as I can unclick my mute button. First of all, the federal money, as I read what the running rules are, and Sandy, you can correct me, the federal money can be used for the bond issue and capital projects, but not to reduce taxes. Is that correct?
It definitely cannot be used to reduce taxes.
And Ohio was taking that to the Supreme Court or to federal court. And we'll have to see how they make out. But
correct. But as far as what it can be expended on, I'm still attending weekly seminars, and we don't get the same answer twice. So I don't think anybody knows exactly what we can spend it on, except tax reduction is definitely one of the no's until the Supreme Court decides the Ohio case.
So capital projects would seem to be a natural fit for that kind of money.
Well, capital projects need to be related to COVID or COVID recovery. For example, in addition to the town hall would definitely not qualify. Air conditioners on the school roof may qualify, but I haven't been able to have anybody give me a definitive answer on that yet.
It sounds like we're going to have problems spending whatever it is that we get if the rules are that tight.
The rules at this point are very tight. So we've been giving a lot of feedback to, and the seminars I've been on have been sponsored by the Connecticut Council of Municipalities and the Council of Small Towns here in Connecticut. And the mayors and first selectmen are almost unanimous in telling the Department of Treasury that the restrictions are far too restrictive. And they also have a hold harmless effect on the federal government side. So if they come in after we've spent the money and say, no, this is not a valid expenditure, they'll make us pay it back.
Ouch.
Yeah, exactly.
Thank you. So I guess my point is we can assume nothing about the federal monies coming in. I yield the remainder of my time, Madam Chairman.
Okay. So any other questions in terms of where we are right now before we get into conversations as to where do we need to go?
Charlie would like to be recognized.
Thank you. Charlie?
Unmuting. Thank you. Thank you, Dick. I concur with what I've heard about comments on the reason for voting no in any referendum. I don't think when I spoke to anyone prior to the referendum where they said that it wasn't going to be voted down and that there's always two in Bolton. Whether there is or not doesn't really matter. That's one of the things that was said. The other thing that was said over and over again was that, again, I've heard the same comments about the federal monies that are coming. And the public just doesn't see at all the fact that those monies may be coming, but it may end up being something that we don't qualify for anything on. And we may be unable to spend them or penalized if we spend them inappropriately. So I'm disappointed that the public doesn't understand this. However, we have to continue on with this budget process, and with that understanding in place, I'm completely aware we're going to have this second referendum, and we'll just go from there.
Okay. Thank you, Charlie. Any other comments before we get into some scenarios? One of the things, well, any other comments before I get into scenarios? Okay, then one of the things that I wanted to throw out there, we do have to reduce our expenditures. That is by charter what we have to do. One of the things I took a look at is because our ask on the expenditure side is really not that much more than what was approved last year, that really highlights the fact that we have less revenues in many cases so we need to increase our taxes in order to cover the spend. We already know that interest rates are down. We know that Parks and Rec isn't as well. COVID didn't happen, so we know that there are some things that are probably not going to happen there. Late fees based on waivers. There are lots of different reasons why we don't have as much revenue income feeding into next year's budget. So if we have to go down, one option is to reduce to be exactly 1 mil than what we are today. So today's mill rate is 38.89. And so if we go in with a mill rate 39.89, we would need to cut an additional $56,000. So if you look in this third column, you can sort of see the bottom red line number is what we would need to reduce town and education total by. One of the concerns that I have heard from multiple people on the board is we want to do enough because we want to get this budget passed, but that needs to be balanced with the fact that both the town and the education side spent considerable amount of time being very thoughtful and very thorough in the budgets that they created. The budget asks were not unreasonable in my mind. And when we put together the referendum numbers, we were mostly in agreement that we felt comfortable with what those numbers were. So now we are in the world of reducing those numbers. And the question is going to be, how much do we feel comfortable reducing with still feeling comfortable that we can at least maintain most of the services? Any reduction is going to it could potentially reduce a service. I mean, that's the long and short of it. I wanted to also throw out sort of an additional scenario there. If we wanted to go to 39.5 as a mill rate, we would have to cut an additional $217,000. So those are just sort of two scenarios that I have. I ran with Jill, just confirming those numbers. I wanted to throw those out there to try to spur sort of the next round of conversations. And I mean,
I believe Bob wanted to make a motion at one point.
So Bob Monroe, you had wanted to make a motion. And given what I have showed you and what we've talked about so far, do you want to continue to do that, or are you, do you have additional conversation you want to have?
I would be ready to make a motion when you are ready for it.
Okay, Bob, if you would like to make that motion.
Okay, with that, my previous comments withstanding, and the reason why I have not been able to raise my hand, I haven't been able to figure out how to do it with this screen here. So excuse the impropriety there. I think we should come in, I think, and I do appreciate, Emily, the fact that you did 2 additional scenarios with some additional reductions in the new money requests. I'm thinking that we can do something in between there at this point. especially given the light and it was, I thought, a very telling number there to see that we're only $165,000 more than last year's budget. I believe that was the number at this point.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to suggest something in between here.
Okay.
You had the $56,000 reduction to the 217. The 217 would actually be a reduction then, based on those net numbers we looked at a minute ago, and I referred to as, I believe the recall was 164,900 or something above last year's budget, right?
164,950.
Oh yeah, there it is. Okay. So I'm gonna suggest this. I'm going to suggest that the Board of Education request be reduced by an additional $100,000, and that the Board of Selectmen request be reduced by an additional $20,000. That would be $120,000 and be kind of in between those numbers, but be almost significant enough to move the needle somewhat. And that would still provide a little bit more money in this budget than last year. Not much, but.
Okay, there's a motion on the floor to make a reduction to the Board of Education budget of $100,000 and the Board of Selectmen budget $20,000. Is there a second on that motion?
I'll second it so we can continue discussion.
Okay, so Ross Lally has seconded it. Discussion on the motion on the floor. Who would like to start? I guess seeing no hand, oh, I see Dick's hands raised. I was going to jump in, but I will yield the floor to you.
Thank you. In view of the fact that the last two fiscal years, 19 and 20, the combined turnbacks or underspends for the two boards has been on average $928,000. I think that this proposal does not go far enough, that the townspeople are not going to give us a successful referendum, and that we should go to the full 39.5. So I will oppose this motion.
Okay. Dick, if I could just ask a question on that. You had said that the give backs have been $928,000. Year over year, the give backs vary based on what has happened in that particular year. Sometimes it is something costs less.
I'm looking at the audit report for each of those 2 years that I cited, and that's what the numbers are. The other thing too is that we're on track for 2021 to be well over $1 million. So I'm not really interested in debating that. You can look it up in the audit report, but that's my feeling. I'm going to oppose this, oppose the motion.
Okay, thank you. Kristen, I see your hand up.
It's just a question as we're going through this. Do you have the ability to give mill rates with this, Emily, as we talk about reductions, or no?
I might.
I know, yeah, I know you had one spreadsheet a while back. I was just curious. I don't want to get hung up on it, but I didn't know if you still had that formula or not.
You would have to get, so we are looking for an additional $120,000 reduction. So that would be, if you want to give me a second.
I will say, as you're looking that up, looking at the 56, because I'm on the opposite end of the spectrum of Dick, I think that is reasonable because you were looking at just 1 mil increase, which no one's happy about any increase. So I don't want to sound like I'm overjoyed with it because I'm not. But I do think that that is more reasonable, especially considering what we had come up with before, going actually to referendum, getting it down from the 40.116. So I was just curious as we go through this.
Okay.
Point of information to the to our esteemed colleague, Kristen Gorley.
Yes.
Are you saying you would like to amend the motion on the floor to reflect a 1 mil increase rather than something else?
No, it's just a point of discussion. I don't want to amend anything right now while we're still discussing the current
Thank you.
motion. Yeah.
Sorry for the.
I apologize. I didn't know if you had it available, Emily. So
I have an ability. There are certain things that are very easy and certain things that are not quite as easy to calculate. Okay. And obviously, I would want to double check these with Jill before I did anything bigger. So
right.
Okay, if I'm close. Okay, I think if we were to cut or reduce the budgets in total by 120,000, that gets us to a mill rate of 39.59. Just in terms of comparison to. So that would be 0.6 higher than what we are today, correct? Because we're
at 38.85.
Oh, actually, we're at 38.86, aren't we?
86.
Yes.
So, yeah, so I will apologize. I made that 39.89 thinking that we were at 30.89. So
don't you want to come down 0.27 from 39.99? That's what it looks like to me.
Yeah, I mean, with the motion that's on the floor, $120,000 in additional reductions would result in taxes that needed to be raised that equate to needing to be confirmed by Jill, 39.59. Charlie, I see your hand up.
Sorry it took so long. I'm looking at what we're discussing here now, and I'm seeing the number, like you said, Bob was saying, falls between. I don't know if that mill rate sounds exactly right. Part of it is going to be, part of the discussion is going to be is what percentage is that? Because the general populace has been seeing all over the newspapers, 2% increases, 1% increases, or no increase, like Middletown made big news last night at 11 o'clock with no increase. So I was curious as to what the percentage might be of a mill increase. So, and it looks like even at the 20-something reduction, we'll still be looking like a 2% increase, but
By the way, Madam Chairperson, I divided 120 by 450 and got 0.26. And so if you take 0.26 away from 39.99, you get 39.72.
that sounds good to me too.
Okay. And I will point out an error that when at the top here, it says 39.89. I actually meant to say 39.86. I did figure that out to be 39.86. So this general property and the reduction of $56,000 does support 39.86 of a mill rate. So that was my error.
I didn't follow that. Could you say that again?
This third column,
I'm not looking at
the
let me,
column on the sheet that's in front of you, is this still up on the screen?
okay, go ahead. Third column.
Third column where it says mill rate of 39.89, that actually should read 39.86. I mistyped that. The numbers that are in this third column represent a mill rate of 39.86. That's my typo.
And what is the reduction in spending above the last referendum?
So 39.86, we would need to make a reduction of $56,000. So that reduction is correct to support a 39.86.
So what is the implied mill rate of 120,000 additional cuts that Bob has in his motion on the floor? That would be, I think, 39.73. If 450 exactly is a bill.
So
that may not be the case.
1 mil is, I apologize, I wrote that down earlier.
It's on the bottom of your screen. It says 1 mil equals 450,458.
Thank you. I knew I wrote it down somewhere.
So that gives me the same answer. So it would end up being 39.73.
Okay, so 39.73 gets us a if you give me a second, I can sort of do the same thing for what we have. 39.73, and if I have done the math correctly, 17. Okay, so I'm just going to share a different screen. Okay, this should be the same thing, just not in a PDF form, so it's a little bit harder to see on the screen. If the 39.73, I think will give us a tax collection needed of $17,679,124. But what that calculates out to be $114,000 difference. not 120.
Oh,
If I back into 39.73 mill rate.
so all I did was divide 120 by 450 and got 0.27 and subtracted it from 39.99 to get 39.63.
6.3 or 7.3?
Excuse me, 7.3. Let me see, 0.27, 0.72, excuse me, 39.72.
Okay. Wait.
That was the simple calculation that I made.
Decimal places make the difference. I think she's gone out 3 places.
Yeah.
Well, okay, so it was 0.266 was the mill rate when he did that, or excuse me, 0.262. I apologize.
Okay.
So that's how I got to 39.7.
So the thing that my calculator here, I'm for some reason not coming up with that same answer. But I mean, your logic is sound in that it makes sense that it's partially between the two. So whatever reductions that we make, we would have to confirm what the mill rate would be with Jill to make sure that we've done that math correctly.
What are the you said 1 mill is equal to 450, and then what else?
450, 458.
450, 458.
Correct.
Okay, so that's a 0.266 change in the mill rate, and so that would be 39.73, rounding off to what 0.27 in terms of mill rate.
So without getting, I mean, I know, yes, we want to make sure that we understand exactly what the mill rate is, but right now the motion is on the floor to reduce the expenditures by $120,000. And I guess at this point, we think that that would result in a mill rate of 39.73. Or 7.2, somewhere in there. But I guess the question is still, are we comfortable with reducing the two budgets as Bob has suggested, the Board of Ed by 100,000 and the Board of Selectmen by 20,000?
I call for the yeas and nays.
I guess I would like to add my comments. I'm uncomfortable with the split of 100,000, 20,000. And I'm actually also slightly uncomfortable with the total amount of 120,000. I would rather not see it be that high. And I would like it to be split a little bit differently. So I guess that's sort of where my head is at with this. If Kristen, I see your hand just popped up.
Well, so I'm trying to wrap my mind about the motion on the floor and the size of the reduction, because breaking it down, looking at the expenditures that was sent to the referendum, as was stated, it was only $164,954 higher, right?
Correct.
So then we came up with the additional revenue, which was very welcome. So that's reducing that by 78,000. And then if you look at the additional 56,000, then you're reducing it down to, what is that, 132. So if you look at what would be left as far as just an ask from the public, then you're just talking about $32,954. So I think that the motion on the floor, I mean, when we're talking about cuts, you really are going the other way. You really are getting into a cut. It's just something that I think that needs to be recognized as far as the ask of the taxpayer. Does that make sense?
Say that last sentence again.
Well, it's just looking at the increase of expenditures, given the additional money, the revenues of 78,000. And then if you look at what you originally proposed, Emily, the 56,000, well, that reduces the expenditures that would be asked down to 32,954. So just based on that, I would say that the current motion on the floor, the size of the ask in the cut is too large. I'm not comfortable with that, the size of that cut.
Okay. Bob Monroe.
Could we go back, Kristen Gorley, I'm not sure that the numbers you just did were right. I think if we go back to that other screen, if Emily could do that, where it showed the net increase was $165,000, right?
Oh, my apologies. That's not the
You
right.
know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
64,000 something.
Okay. So
I also just ask a point of, while Emily's looking for that screen, I don't know if Bob's motion includes recognizing that additional revenue. Did it, Bob?
Yes, it did. I think, if I remember correctly, the screen that we were looking at, no, not that one.
that one.
This one here, yeah. So the 164,950 was the difference, the increase in this proposed budget versus last year, the budget we're finishing, correct?
Yes.
In the adopted budgets, yes.
Right. So so the motion that I made, forget the 56,000 for a minute, because I made a different motion, a different scenario, if you would, for consistency's sake, of 120, that would leave an increase in the budget of only 44,950. And I would like to just point out for a second, and I know this is all excruciating and tough to deal with and everything else, but we got to deal with it. I would just like to point out, Kristen did affirm, I think, my earlier statement that the total ask from the Board of Ed was 388. And again, she knows how much I think of her work. But anyway, if the total ask for new money was 388, and we reduced, an initial reduction of 100, and then there was additional 60 some odd, for 164,000 total reductions for the BOE. And if we added 100,000 to that, that would be 264,000. That would still leave new money for the Board of Ed of $123,000. And it's not a lot, and they can spend that quickly and easily, and all for good reasons. But again, I think what I'm trying to do is make sure that we have something that does move the needle, that really shows us something significant to the taxpayers, and keeping in mind that we're going to have this other money to figure out what to do with. I have no idea how that's all going to shake out. None of us do.
Kristen Hecht. Ross, I see your hand up, but Kristen, I think you probably want to respond to what Bob Monroe just commented on.
Well, it's not really that per se. It's just that in the back of my mind, I recall another time when the Board of Finance recognized additional revenues prior to making decisions. I think, I could be wrong, but I think before, I think you guys have to make a motion and take a vote on the additional revenues first, and then I think you can do whatever else you're going to do. But that happened a number of years ago, and there was discussion, and that is how it had to go. So I just want to throw that out there before we go down a rabbit hole that maybe you shouldn't go down.
It's a good point of order. Kristen, you're correct. If we change the revenues, we need to recognize it.
Yes, and the only question that I have, and Sandy, maybe you can help me out with this. I know that when we have revised revenues, I think that was before referendum. The fact that we've had one referendum, we're working under a slightly different part of the charter. Is that correct?
That's correct. You can't recognize additional revenues for purposes of the budget, but you can recognize additional revenues for purposes of setting the mill rate.
So the thing that makes it difficult is, so for example, the sheet that I showed you that says, okay, here are the numbers that went from this up to this. That was for demonstration purposes. Here is the revenues as and how they would affect that, the budget. But when we are, because of the way the charter is written, we have to do that as it relates to the mill rate. So there will be one line item saying we have recognized additional revenues, and that therefore is the mill rate because of it.
Good information.
We had this situation in 2019, I think. So
2019, it passed on the first try.
Oh, then it was 20.
It might have been 2017.
Okay. I don't recall, but okay, Ross Lally.
No, I was just thinking my learning from all of this is one is people don't, I just, just following up with what, Kristen had said earlier is, Gurley, that I'm just surprised, basically the people I talked to also said, I said, well, didn't hear from you, before this, referendum. I said, I'm your elected official, and I don't have time to go to meetings. I'm busy. I can't do this. I can't do that. And I said, well, I got a phone number. I have an email address. It's all listed out on, the town website. I don't have time for that. You're supposed to know what I want. And I'm like, and it's just like, well, I guess I knew what other people wanted when I voted yes for this, as opposed to what you wanted. But, it's like, I'm just sharing my frustration because I really didn't hear anything. And it's just a general lack of input for people during the process for, whatever reasons. And I said, that said, what I did learn from those who complained was they don't really care what the total budget is. They're just concerned about what share of it comes out of their pocket. So if you keep the budget the same and somehow manage to find a whole bunch of other revenue that kept their share of it the same or less, they don't care. They wouldn't care if you raised the budget to 50 million and kept their mill rate the same or gave them a little bit back, because that's what they're concerned about. So I'm just going to, that's my take on this. And again, I'm a new person here. I don't know, how this stuff all plays out, but I'm just saying that I think they're focused on the mill rate and what other towns have done or have not done. And they don't really care that the budget's the same as last year, or it's like $50,000 or $100,000 less. They're being asked to pay more of it, as opposed to, other sources of revenue. So if this is one where I'm very frustrated, with this because, I didn't get any feedback from anybody beforehand. And it's after the fact. And it's like, well, you should know what I want, without any input. So, but the input I did get was it's more of the focus on the mill rate than the total budget, because that affects what comes out of their pocket. So that was it. It's just, just my thoughts.
Thank you, Ross. I just texted Jill. I wanted her to confirm, if we made an additional $120,000 cut, what that mill rate would be. And I think, Ross, you brought up a very interesting point. People are, they do want to know what's coming out of their pockets. And we do need to make sure that we're communicating appropriately, since they're obviously not coming to our meetings and they're not necessarily asking us questions. So we need to be very thoughtful in how we're communicating with the public to make sure that they are getting the right information. We need to let them know that the revenues are less than what they have been in the past. And that is one of the significant contributing factors on why we are looking to raise taxes, because the ask is not much bigger than what it was last year. And this is in all of our communications, you know, when we're talking one-on-one to people, when we're, you know, in a crowd, on social media, Facebook, emails, in the newspaper, everything. We need to be very conscious of, you know, that we're coming up and having the clear messages. So, sorry, I just wanted to throw that out there. Kristen, I see your hand up.
Well, I'm pulling out some scenarios. So, you know, first round, again, as it had been brought up historically, it sounds like budget's going to go up. People are going to pay more. It's automatically going to get shot down. Maybe not automatically, but pretty close. So if we make a cut now, looking at the size of the cut, realizing that this could go another round, and I think this is an important note, if we can get something cut and do a smaller cut, you know, I'm not going to be happy about it, but that 56 would be reasonable, and there would probably be a service here and there that would be lost. But if we jump down to a cut the size of what Bob is asking to this round, and hopefully it won't go a third round. I mean, I would be thrilled if this only went one more round. That's a bigger cut. We're looking at more services getting cut, and I'd be upset about that. But here's the big thing. If we start off, if this next round we go 120,000 and it doesn't get passed, where are we going to go from there? You see what I'm saying? Like, at some point, we just have to, I think, kind of hold our ground with how much we're willing to cut. I think if we go in aggressive, you know, we're kind of signing our death warrant as far as the services that will be eliminated over the course of this next year. Or that's my concern. That's just where my thinking is with this. Again, I'm just trying to think down the line. But, you know, like as Ross said, I'm also new with this as well. So any additional thoughts or insights on that would be certainly appreciated.
Bob Monroe, yes. Now I'm the one who can't unmute.
I really don't think you're going to see any difference at all in the services, even with my motion.
Is that with passing the 125, or is that when we have to do additional cuts after that?
I'm suggesting that we give this our best shot now. And be absolutely truthful about it.
Okay. Dick, sorry, you have your hand up. Yes.
Yeah, thanks. Let me check. I guess I am unmuted. So I will relate to you a little anecdote from a few years ago. It was either my first or second year on the board. And I suggested we cut about this much. And I was told gravely, in stentorious tones, by a Board of Education member that teachers would be let go if we did that. Okay. And at the end of that fiscal year, the Board of Ed gave back $400,000. So you're not going to see any change, even if you doubled the size of Bob's cuts. There won't be any services lost whatsoever.
sorry, I was just confirming, $120,000 reduction is 3971 for a mill rate. So just as a point of information. Okay, I think at this point, we have a motion on the floor. If there's no more discussion, I think we should vote on this motion. And then,
Or did we want to account for what, Kristen Hecht had said about, do we need to vote on something else before this?
No, we don't need to do that. Point of order, that was what Sandy basically told us. We can't vote it. We can't do that, as a matter of fact.
yeah, we can recognize those revenues, and that's why I keep saying recognize those revenues. We can recognize them in terms of when we're setting the mill rate,
Okay.
when we're having this discussion. But from a budget perspective, we adopted the revenues that we adopted for this year and next year stands, and they are what they are at this point.
Okay.
So,
Thank you.
Charlie.
What does that do though with our estimate as what the mill rate's going to be? Don't we have to, isn't that a separate issue then?
So we can, when we set the mill rate, we can set it at the, if this passes at 39.71.
When we go to the public for this referendum and we come with another $120,000 cut,
Mm-hmm.
there's an estimate of what the mill rate's going to be. That's
No,
no?
not in the budget document.
Actually, it is in the budget document.
Oh,
It's
it is?
the first page of what it is proposed, and in terms of what that looks like, there will be a note in there that we can recognize additional revenues. So the proposed mill rate would be, if this motion passes, 39.71.
Oh, okay. We can account for it now, but
But the way it's represented in the budget documents is confusing. I'll be totally honest. It's
We can't change the revenue numbers in the spreadsheet, but you can say that the mill rate will be 39.71.
okay.
Is what she's trying to say, Charlie.
yeah, that's what I was needed clarification on. Okay.
Give me one second.
You're muted, I believe.
So we have a motion on the floor to reduce the Board of Education budget by $100,000, the Board of Selectmen budget by $20,000, which would, given the revenues that we could recognize, would result in a 39.71 mill rate. Bob, is there any addition or change to that motion? Did I say it appropriately, reiterate it appropriately?
I believe you did.
Okay. Then what I will do is take a vote by roll call. I'm going to start with Bob Monroe,
I'm going to support that motion.
Rob
Yeah,
Lally,
okay.
Aye.
Dick Tuttle,
No,
Kristen Gorley,
Nay.
Charlie Dana,
Aye.
and Emily Bradley votes nay. So we have a tie.
the motion is not agreed to.
So the motion is not agreed to. In terms of, so then we need to revise we need to come up with a new motion well, we need a new motion.
I'll offer a motion.
Okay,
I move that we reduce the planned spending by $225,000 additional.
And what is your recommendation split on that?
I will leave it to be amended for purposes of determining the split.
Okay, so the motion on the floor is to reduce the overall budget by $225,000. And if you give me a moment, I will try to figure out if somebody has a comment, wants to start the discussion while I figure out what that mill rate would be.
Emily, you need a second.
Somebody needs to second it. Thank you, Linda.
I'll second it.
Okay, Bob Monroe is a second it.
And then
May I speak in support of my motion?
Yes.
I think we're dreaming if we think that anything less is going to pass the referendum. People are going to say $120,000. That's working around the periphery. I also think that given the historical turnback levels, we've still got a ways to go, and this will not result in any reduction in services. That's basically it. Thank you.
225.
Should be somewhere around 39.5. And Bob Monroe would like to be recognized.
Bob Monroe.
I think, Dick, that in your motion, you're going to need to define how you would allocate that. Now, one of the things that I think we need to be aware of is present state law in regards to Board of Education budgets. You cannot reduce the Board of Education budget in a coming year to less than what it was the previous year. You're looking for an additional $100,000, I think, from what I had suggested at 120. I think your total was 225. I think you said.
Yes.
And if it was coming, additional money is coming out of the Board of Ed, you're going to be running real close to a decrease there.
I'm open to suggestions on the split.
You know, watch that.
I'm open to suggestions on the split. Assuming we have real interest in the motion.
The other comment I would make is that would actually be to go that 100 the net number that you had up there, Emily, the $164,950, I believe it was.
Yes.
That would represent the increase in the proposed budget. Yeah, 164,950. And that did not, and what you're talking about is 225 additional. That would be actually a decrease of about $60,000 from the previous budget, I believe. My basic math.
Given the size of the turnback side, that could easily be accommodated.
So if I were to your previous point of not reducing the Board of Ed budget more than that, we do, like I said, we do have to be careful. So it'd be the 388 minus 165, and that would be what would be left, and we couldn't cut more than that.
165 out of 225.
Out of 388.
It leaves 123, but.
Sandy, can you just confirm, do we have the same restriction on the town side?
We do not,
Okay,
but I can guarantee you that if you cut the town 200,000, there will be cuts in services.
I don't think we're talking about cutting the town 200,000.
so, okay, further discussion on, the motion on the floor is a $225,000 cut. And we don't have a split between Board of Ed and Board of Selectmen, but we do need to think about if, does somebody want to throw out a proposal for that split to then Dick can amend his motion?
So, what are we saying, the maximum amount that the Board of Ed could be cut? So I'm just trying to do a scenario plan here.
$388,108 was their full ask. We've already cut them $164,499, which leaves $223,609 left of new money for them.
So
Town side,
so my amendment to this then would be 150,000 from the Board of Ed and 75,000 from the town.
okay, can I have a second on the amendment?
I'll second it for discussion purposes.
Okay, thank you, Bob. That was Bob Monroe, right?
Correct.
Okay. If with a reduction of $225,000, 150,000 from Board of Ed, 75,000 from the Board of Selectmen, that gives us a resulting mill rate of 39.48.
That I think has a chance of passing. I don't know. I think to really get to the point of having confidence in passing is if you took it down by 300,000. But let's see what happens.
Other discussion before I call for a vote? Then I will call for a vote. I will start with the person who put the motion on the floor, Dick.
Aye.
Kristen,
No, nay.
Charlie,
Nay.
Bob Monroe,
Nay.
Ross Lally,
No.
and Emily votes no. So that motion does not carry.
So
So based on the two motions, the majority felt that 225 was too big a cut and that 120 was split. It was a 3-3 split. So that tells me that the board is thinking that is less than 225 and somewhere around 120. Now, for those who voted no for 120, I guess the sense would be was that too high or too low? Because that will then help define which direction we go for the next motion.
Emily?
Yes.
I would also throw in, because I think there's also discomfort around the split of that original motion that Bob Monroe.
Very true. The original motion was 100 to BOE and 20 to BOS. And so, yes, the split might be part of the discomfort.
Mm-hmm.
Would somebody like to put another motion on the floor?
Emily, I'll put a motion on the floor for a 100,000 cut, with the breakdown being 25,000 for the Board of Selectmen and 75 for the Board of Ed.
Do I have a second?
I'll second it for discussion purpose, at least.
Okay, Bob and Rose seconds. So the motion is to reduce expenditures by $100,000, 75,000 coming from the Board of Education, 25,000 coming from the Board of Selectmen. Discussion on that motion. Bob and Rowe, yes.
I don't see, obviously there's not a large difference between the motion I put out there and what Kristen's offering. If I remember correctly, did Kristen, did you oppose the 100 and the 20?
Yes. I did.
Okay.
And I'll, would you like me to say why, or where I'm uncomfortable?
Sure.
Okay. So again, I've expressed just going in from my feeling too high. Like I said, I felt like regardless of what we were going to put out, it was going to be higher. So it was going to get voted down this first round. Looking at the thought, and I think we've all shared the frustration with how much thought and care we put into what we presented. And again, very, very honestly, for one, I don't want to validate the lack of understanding and the knee-jerk reaction of just, nope, I'm going to vote it down. So therefore, our reaction needs to be a big cut. Not that yours was 120 of 120,000 is that significantly different, but I thought, just to balance it out a little bit, given the unusual factors that have come out of this COVID year and the things that have changed, the things that we're still going to have to adapt to just because some things are going to be standard. I'm more comfortable with reducing the cut down to 75,000 as opposed to 100,000, and then offsetting that a little bit by cutting the Board of Selectmen, just balancing out a bit, and moving that up to 25,000. So that's where my mind is.
Thank you, Kristen. Now I'm the one who can't unmute. Additional comments, thoughts, hopes, desires? Charlie.
Thank you. It seems to me I heard early in the evening that we recognize additional funds coming in already that is in the vicinity of, what was it? 75,000?
Yeah,
65,000 that were recognized.
Yes, it was about 74 and change.
Yeah. And we're putting another 100,000 on top of that. So that technically is 175,000 that's causing the mill rate to change. And if, that's not a small sum. It's a pretty decent sum. It's not as much as some would like it to be, but I think it's a comfortable step to take. And I do think that we're borderlining, beginning to actually cut services if we go much more than that. So.
Thank you, Charlie. Ross, I see your hand up.
Yeah, to me, it's just really what do we think the voters are going to say or do? Because, we talk about how much effort we put into it, and they don't really care, to be honest with you. So I think that's something that we need to also recognize. It's just like when you go to the store and you don't want to wait in a long line, they can give you an explanation of why you're waiting in a long line. And at the end of the day, you don't really care. And so I think that unfortunately, we need to look at it from that perspective is they don't really care how much effort we put into this. They want to know what the bottom line impact is to their, their pocketbook. And then that comes down to, what do we think is reasonable, to help, meet what their requests are without doing a knee-jerk reaction. And again, I don't really know, what that answer is. Because I also, I'm sitting here, I'm really torn by this because there's one thing you could do, like, Dick is saying, is like, just go the full amount. And then if they look at that and say, oh, they suddenly just dropped it by this much, well, where's more? So there's one possibility if you do that. And then there's another one, well, if you don't mind having a third go around with this, is you come up with some reasonable number and see, what the feedback is we get from that, from a number that we think is, reasonable based on our experience. And the other thing I will say is just to support what you said, Dick, I've done process improvement work and expense cutting and, in business world, and nobody really misses a 1% cut. And that's what we're really talking about. When you start talking around $200,000, you're really talking like a 1%, less than 1% reduction of the total. So I tend to agree with you, Dick, is that we're not going to miss it. But by the same token, what is the right thing we need to do? So again, I'm kind of leaning towards, something like, that 100,000 to 120, maybe somewhere in there. And, with the explanation to the voters as we looked at this, here's the reasoning that went in to do this. If we do have to cut substantially more, services, there's the potential for services to get cut. So I'm kind of, leaning, the more I think about it, the more I'm leaning is let's just come up with a reasonable number for a first pass with the understanding that we may all be back here again when I, text Emily the results in 2 weeks from, when I read the tapes in the machine. So, if we think that's the better approach and you don't mind, coming back here and doing it again because, okay, now we've got the feedback, let's try it again. I mean, that's really the risk to this is if they don't like it in 2 weeks, we'll be back here doing this again. And, I don't know how big a deal that is. I don't like doing it, but, if it's the right thing to do to make sure we don't cut the budget too much, then, maybe that is the better approach instead of like caving and then seeing if they suddenly want more than, what we, cave to.
Thank you, Ross. Kristen, I see your hand is up.
Oh, well, no, I was just going to say some along the same lines. It's just we do have to think about our response carefully to this and the message that we are giving. And if going in with a huge cut of, 200 plus, that is, I mean, if I were a voter, I'd be like, oh, and I am a voter, but I mean, if I was somebody who voted no originally and then saw a huge cut, what would go through my mind would be, oh, there is all this money. See, I knew it. And, I just think it's better for our bottom line. It's better for what the town is able to provide to go with a lesser amount in the neighborhood of 100,000 as opposed to going much higher than that. Again, just caving so quickly, I feel like it would just have consequences and very negative consequences. And ultimately, I think it affects the trust in the voters, thinking about what we present, especially, with that first round, when we put a lot of care and thought into these budgets. It doesn't mean a whole lot if they don't trust the number that's being presented and what they're voting on.
Mm-hmm.
Oh.
Thank you. I do have one comment, and I think this is one of the things that when I was looking at Bob Monroe's motion, as well as Kristen Gorley's motion, I take a look at just the relationship of the Board of Education budget to the town budget, Board of Education is 2/3. It's 2/3, 1/3. So one of my thoughts is, shouldn't our cuts be sort of along those lines? The split be along those lines. So I just want to throw that out there in terms of the motion that's on the floor. It is 75-25, total of $100,000. I didn't know if there was any discussion or thoughts of maybe amending that to be more in line with the split of Board of Ed, 2/3, 1/3, just in terms of the total number of budget. Just tossing it out there. Kristen.
I would be comfortable with amending my motion to reflect the 66% to the third.
Can we make round numbers of like 65-45?
Yeah, I'm comfortable with that. So do I need to state that?
Yes, you need to amend your motion, and then I need a second.
You would need to be 65-35, I believe.
Sorry, 35.
So I make an amendment to my original motion, changing it to cut to the Board of Selectmen, 35,000, and a cut to the Board of Education, 65,000, for a total cut of 100,000 in reductions.
Do I have a second on that amendment?
Second for discussion.
Okay, Charlie seconded that amendment. So 65,000 Board of Ed, 35,000 Board of Selectmen, total reduction of $100,000. That would be a mill rate of 39.76 if when we recognize those other revenues in addition to this. Additional comments, discussion?
I plan to abstain on the amendment, but that's what I was trying to do when I amended my motion, was to make it fairly pro rata.
Okay, thank you. Any other discussion? Otherwise, I will call for a vote. Okay, by roll call, Kristen Gorley,
Aye.
Ross Lally,
Aye.
Bob Monroe,
Aye.
Charlie Dana,
Aye.
Dick Tuttle,
Abstain.
and Emily votes aye. Motion passes. So we are looking to, this is where we need to do one more motion.
No, actually, you need to vote on the motion that's on the floor.
I just did.
No, that was the amendment.
Yeah, there's two steps to it. We did the amendment, I believe.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. You don't need another motion. You need to vote on the motion that's on the floor as amended. Now.
Okay, that's my bad. I thought we were voting on the results of the amended. So what we just voted for was that, yes, we accept the amended motion to be still on the floor. So now we need to vote on the amended motion.
Correct.
Gotta love Robert's rules. That's why I'm named Emily. Okay, so now we are voting on the actual motion of 65,000 from the Board of Ed, 35,000 from the Board of Selectmen, total reductions of 100,000. I will start again with roll call. Kristen Gorley.
Aye.
Ross Lally.
Aye.
Bob Monroe.
Aye.
Charlie Dana.
Aye.
Dick Tuttle.
No.
Emily Bradley. Aye. Motion carries. We are that $65,000 reduction from Board of Ed, $35,000 reduction from Board of Selectmen, $100,000 total reduction in expenditures. There is one final, correct me if I'm wrong, I need someone to make a final motion of, hold on a second. I need to do the math on where we are and then
You need a motion on the ballot
question.
question.
Yeah. 229, say that again, please. I've got one digit missing here. So 22,974,494. So does somebody want to ballot? Okay. So I need someone to read this as a motion and second, and then we will vote on this.
It's June 17th, 2021 regular meeting. The Board of Finance of the Town of Bolton, Connecticut voted the following: shall the annual budget for the Town of Bolton, Connecticut for the fiscal year 2022 as recommended by the Board of Finance in the adoption, it's in the amount of $22,973,494 be adopted.
May I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Ross. Any discussion? Then I will, by roll call, vote on this. Ross Lally,
Aye.
Bob Monroe,
Aye.
Dick Tuttle,
No,
Charlie Dana,
Aye.
Kristen Gorley,
Aye.
Emily Bradley. Aye. I got everybody right. Motion carries. Okay. So this is the number that will be going to referendum. That the date will be confirmed, will be set by the Board of Selectmen, but it is tentatively set for June 29th, which is a Tuesday. I would like to set up a meeting, assuming that that is the referendum date, that we will have a special Board of Finance meeting on right afterwards, like we did this past week at 8:15 on the 29th. And Sandy will advise us if that date changes, assuming we can, hoping everybody can put that on their calendar.
I'm looking at my calendar and there's already a Board of Finance meeting there.
Well, I mentioned it on Tuesday, so I'm
Maybe I did it then.
I think you probably did it then. Okay, let me go back to our agenda. Item number 6, meeting calendar for, so in terms of our next, for our meetings, this is our last regular meeting until September. Obviously, we will continue to meet, have special meetings until the referendum is passed and we've set a mill rate. So like I said, our next meeting is June 29th at 8:15. I wanted to throw it out to the Board of Finance. As some of you may know, I am starting, I'm going back to school and working on my master's. And classes are Tuesday and Thursday evenings. So I wanted to ask the Board of Finance if they would be willing to change our meeting calendar for the rest of this fiscal year, starting in September. So it's the last couple months of the year from the third Thursday of the month to either the third or fourth Wednesday of the month.
Sure.
Yep.
Yep. Fourth Wednesday would be better for me, but as opposed to the third, but no problem in general.
Does the fourth Wednesday work for people?
Yes.
So
For me,
when is that for September? That would be the 23rd? Oh, it's your 22nd. 22nd, I'm sorry.
So
Yeah, that works.
So it would be September 22nd, October 27th, November 24th, which is the day before Thanksgiving. So for November, we may want to make it November 17th.
What does the town calendar say? Are we going to have a problem with the meeting room? Because I'm assuming we're going to switch over to in person.
There are currently no meetings scheduled for the fourth Wednesday of any month, but the third Wednesday could be a conflict.
So even better to do it on the 4th.
Well, the week of Thanksgiving, it would be very difficult to do it on the 4th.
Christmas.
Yeah.
So that's why is that? This is that's the day before Thanksgiving. Yes, we would.
Yes, it
have
is.
to do it on a Tuesday or a Monday
Or the previous week.
or the previous week. Yeah.
Emily, this is Sandy. I just want to point out to you that because you're altering your calendar, all of the meetings, I believe, will need to be special meetings, although I will confirm that with the town clerk and get back to you.
Okay.
Even though we're starting a new fiscal year.
It's because meetings have to be set by Connecticut law by January 1 for the following calendar year.
Okay.
Sandy and Emily, this is Linda.
Yes.
I think if you submit a revised calendar 30 days before you have your next meeting, then you can do it that way and they can still be regular meetings.
Oh, that would be great news, Linda.
Okay. I will work with Jill to create the revised calendar, but right now, talking September 22nd, October 27th, November 17th, because that is the third Wednesday, but that is also because Thanksgiving, and December 22nd.
Is this board still going to be existing from November onwards?
Well, until that vote for you're talking about the Charter Revision Commission?
In particular, how does Sandy think that the transition period, if the revision passes, will be worded?
It will not be worded for effective for this election, I believe. We haven't worked on transition yet, but I think it'll become effective with the next municipal election, which would be 2023. There could be a new composition of this board, however, because the election is Tuesday after the first Monday in November, and then boards take office on the on the Monday following
The election?
2 weeks later.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So this is an election year for some of the members of the Board of Finance. So depending on the result of that election, some of the members may change. Right. Okay. So I want to personally thank the Board of Finance for changing their meeting nights. I want to continue, but I cannot be in two places at once. even through Zoom. I don't think that's just physically possible. So I do want to thank you. I also want to thank the board and everybody else for your comments tonight, your participation. I know it's been a long process. We will see how the next referendum go. I'm very hopeful. I do think, as I mentioned before, and it has been mentioned earlier, we need to be, making sure that we're communicating things. If we, encourage people to review the minutes, encourage people to listen to our meetings, because I think that will be educational and they'll get information and then they'll understand the federal money isn't just to be used for anything. They'll understand that our revenues are less and therefore we have to make it up with an increase in taxes, that there are expenditures that have increased, utility bills are higher, things are more expensive. So we need to, as best as we can as a board, support this democratic process and make sure that we are cognizant of what we're saying and how we're saying it. Any other comments or questions? Because otherwise it is 9:38. And I think it's dinner time.
Yeah, right?
Then hearing no other comments, I hereby adjourn this meeting. Thank you, everybody. Please vote on the 29th, and I will see you all on Zoom on the 29th, unless Sandy tells us otherwise that it is a different day. So. Yeah.
Could I ask just a question before we all sign off?
Yes.
When are we anticipating going back to in-person? The end of the summer?
Bolton is currently the only the only town in the entire state of Connecticut who is still under an a yellow COVID warning. That means we have a higher COVID spread rate in Bolton than anywhere else in the state of Connecticut.
Crazy.
I wish I knew why, but it's very difficult for me to say that we're going to open for in-person gatherings when we still have a spread like that and a vaccination rate that's well below the state average. Right now, we're about 10 percentage points below the state average for vaccination rates.
Wow.
So it's not feeling good. Encourage all your friends to stay home when they feel ill, keep their children home when their children are ill, and get those vaccinations.
Here, here.
Way ahead of you, Sandy.
Yeah.
February 24th was my second one.
Well, mine wasn't until April, but it's done.
Yep.
You'd be crazy not to.
So I think that to answer your question, Dick, I would not foresee us being in person until the fall. I mean, like I said, this is our last regular meeting. And I think all our special meetings, till we get the budget passed, will all be Zoom. So.
Thank you.
So thank you, everybody. Have a wonderful evening. I will see you in 2 weeks.
Have a good weekend, everybody.
Good luck,
Take
everybody.
care.
Bye.
Bye.